Hello everybody. So I recently won a mixing contest and we had to mix the Prague Philharmonic Orchestra. And so this is the piece we had to mix. So I thought I would make a short mix deconstruction of this one. So in this session we have room mics, so natural live recording room mics, so Deca3, outrigs and surrounds, pretty standard. And then we have a series of closed mics, which actually aren't that close, but we will see that later. So that's strings, brass, winds, and here's the room mics. And then we have some percussion closed mics as well. So that's about it. So let's see what I did. Let's start with the Deca3, because that's one of the most important mic positions for live orchestra. So as you can see, I just kept the levels the same for all the Deca3 mics, hard pan left, right. On it, there is not much. So there is nothing on the individual tracks. This might seem like I'm cutting a lot of mid-range, but you will see that we actually get lots of mid-range from the other mics as well. So this is just kind of picking the qualities I like the best about each mic position. So the Deca3, it was a little bit undefined in the mids, it was a little bit boxy, and I actually like the mid-range from other mic positions better. So this one I mostly kept it for some of the bass and some of the highs. Of course, there is still plenty of mids, but I'm taming the mids quite a bit in this one. And then some high air EQ and a bit of bass saturation here. This is kind of an EQ saturator all at once. So this is adding mostly highs and saturating the highs a bit as well, a bit like tape. And this is bass saturation, not really boosting the bass, just saturation, because I have it on these settings, but yeah. That's what the plugins are doing. You can hear the plugins here. So then the outrigs. The outrigs are a little bit more mid-rangey, I believe. And mostly wider. So there was some resonance bass notes. So I targeted this one here with a bit of dynamic EQ and fixed EQ. Mostly a similar thing, just getting rid of lots of the mid-range. The thing is, these room mics were a little bit mushy, and it was a bit hard to distinguish the individual instruments, right? It was just kind of, undefined. So actually, you will see later that these closed mics aren't that close, and we actually get lots of mid-range and lots of bleed from everything. These are more like mid mics. They sound very kind of distant for spot mics somehow. So lots of the mid-range actually came from these because it's just more defined. And I'm using the room mics here a bit more like space, but they're not that defined. So I'm mostly using them for like the high frequencies and the low frequencies. But like the definition in the mids was slightly better in the other mics. So of course there is still plenty of mids, as I said, but yeah. So yeah, this is not doing anything. And same kind of story, just the same kind of plugins on the outrigs. Of course, hard pan mics. This is left-right, stereo mics. Okay, so the surrounds. So this is mostly capturing the room, so kind of using this as reverb, slightly quieter than the other mic positions, as you can see. Again, cutting some of the honkiness. So the all rooms bus is the sum of these three room mic positions. So that's just all of these together, as you can see. And on this, I have bass control. The reason is some of the pizzicatos in this track were a bit strong. You can see that, like the first pizzicatos here, no issues, and suddenly boing, like way too loud. So this was a bit weird. The bass in this track was fairly inconsistent in the recordings. So it was good to tame the bass. I'm actually doing even more bass taming later, you will see on the master. But yeah, this is just to prevent these huge resonances in the room mics and prevent the kind of controlling the bass in the room mics, right? So that's pretty much it for my room mics. Oh yeah, the reverb. So all the room mics are being sent to a couple of reverbs. So just a little bit of this one and more of this one. So what are these? These are a combination of two reverbs, VSS3 and Verb Classics. So don't pay attention to the levels here because actually the output of this one is greater than this one. But I would say it's kind of like 60-40 or like 17-30. So mostly VSS3, some large wormhole, and some Verb Classics, so Concert B. This is just two reverbs I really like. So this one is good because it just gives a lot of width and space, and this one has a better tail. So together they sound really nice, but I'm not sending a whole lot. This is mostly just to make the room a little bit more nicer to hear, you know? So if I just remove the reverb, you will see the difference. A bit more size. This is especially important for the quieter sections where the instruments can feel a bit more dry compared to the loud sections. Gives a bit more life, but it's not like a huge difference. This second reverb is basically two VSS3s, but dual mono. So I'm isolating the right channel, isolating the left channel, running them through the two stereo reverbs, so same parameters as the other VSS3. And then I'm soloing the right again and soloing the left again. So these plugins actually do the same thing. Like this solos the left, this solos the left, and this solos the right, and this solos the right. But they're being processed through the same reverbs. But because it's independent kind of channels, independent kind of processing lines, it sounds a bit wider than a stereo reverb. So I'm injecting this really wide dual mono reverb. There is just a tiny bit of it. It's almost inaudible, but I'm injecting this really wide stereo reverb, dual mono reverb, with the normal stereo reverbs. It's a bit of a messy reverb setup, but this is what I often do nowadays because it sounds quite nice, I think. If I just make it even louder, you will see. Yeah, it's a dual mono reverb, I guess. That's what it is. So, okay. That's for the room mics. So now let's check out the individual mics of the instruments. So an issue with this recording, as I said before, with the room mics, you don't really get any detail. Like you don't hear the instruments very defined. For example, there was no cellista. So when it comes to hearing the instruments individually, to get the proper balance in the instrumentation and actually hear these at all, I had to write the close mics a bit. So cellista, as you can see, well, no EQ, I guess. I don't know why. I didn't want to cut the low end, I guess, for some reason. And then there is a reverb. So this is SP 2016. And this is adding a bit of depth. So this is making sure that the cellista sounds a little bit more in the room. And that actually allows me to make the close mic sound a bit better by itself, which means I can ride it higher and it doesn't sound too close and weird. Because this puts a bit of distance to the sound. So I like to do this on close mic sometimes because it allows me to ride them higher without them sounding too dry and weird, right? But you need to be careful because then this puts the bleed of the orchestra also in a weird room. So you can't ride the close mic too high or it sounds weird too. But this is what it is. Actually, did I do any volume automation on this? No, I just left the track like that. You can see it makes it sound like it's more in a hall, which is great because I absolutely needed this close mic to hear this instrument. So I also have my hall reverb, of course, on top of that. So the sound. So both of these reverbs are helping a lot. I'm panning it with balance panning. Then the harp. Lots of bleed. Same story. Same concept. Some EQ here. This was just to make the high harp notes a little bit more blended. Because just because it's a closed mic doesn't mean I want to have really sharp notes. Because I'm really using this kind of like a room mics as well, you know, because I'm faking a room. Because I had to write them this high to be able to hear them in context of the whole mix, I had to kind of treat them a bit more like independent kind of sounds, if that makes sense. A bit more as if it was like a harp library, you know. And I'm also writing the volume a little bit on the more important parts. And also these parts had less bleed of the other instruments, so I could write it higher. Then the gong, I'm muting it everywhere, just adding it where it's needed because there is no need to have all that bleed if it's not even playing, right? So cut the rumble from it. Same concept. No padding actually for this, just centered. I'm guessing the bass drum was close to the gong because there was a bunch of bass, and that's also probably why I left it centered. And I mean, the gongs wouldn't necessarily be on the sides, so it's fine to leave it centered. Also, note that this reverb room thing, oh yeah, I sent it to the hall as well. But this reverb room thing also makes the mono close mics feel wider, which preserves more stereo width, and it prevents the kind of mono sound from seeping in the orchestra and making the orchestra feel unnecessarily mono. If I remove this, clearly a mono sound, right? So if I mix this too high, it would suddenly feel weird, as if I'm injecting a mono sound within the stereo orchestra. So it might sound weird. So this helps a lot with that. Even without the hall reverb, this makes it stereo. And also the hall reverb helps further with that, obviously. So this wasn't named, but I think it's the snare. So I limited it a bit because there is some loud transients. This makes it a little bit more integrated in the mix and prevents these sharp transients from poking. And it also makes it sound more like an ensemble instead of a solo snare. And I kind of like the sound of that, so... gives it a bit more, I would say, oomph. There was some wild timpani resonances below. I just needed to keep the snare in this mic. This is a bit of a different plugin, but sort of similar to SP2016. As you can see, it's making it not mono. It's spreading a bit. And then... So On the snare, I'm using different parameters. As you can see, I'm using it on position 100 and mix 25. So I'm actually using this one like a normal reverb. I'm not using this one for the early reflections, just the early reflections. I'm actually using the SP2016 for the tail on this one. It's kind of extending the snare a bit, making it a bit more rich and a bit of a longer, nicer tail. So yeah. Actually, of course, this has a bit of hole as well. So this is raw. Yep. Okay, so timpanis, 2 timpani mics here, which are sent to the which are sent to the timp bus, which for some reason is very far away. But that's how it is. So I'm trying to get width from this. Now, a timpani player doesn't have telescopic arms, but because there is L and R here, there was 2 stereo mics. So I didn't pan them fully, but I panned them a little bit just to spread the timpani recording a little bit. And also this helps by spreading the bleed, because there is a bunch of bleed in the orchestra, or the other instruments. This helps preventing any kind of mono buildup of bleed. And so it's a good thing, meaning you don't really get all the instruments in the center. So let's see. So as you can see, I pan them like 60 left, 60 right. And then I pan the whole thing, so in the bus, a little bit left, 10%, just because I wanted the timpanis to feel slightly left. And then, so nothing here, some EQ. So cutting a bit of the mud here. A bit of saturation to make the sound a little bit richer. This also sort of softens the transients and make the timpani again a little bit less pointy feeling and a little bit less close mic feeling, because with saturation or with the reverb I used on the snare before, all of this kind of helps smearing the sound a little bit. Of course, it's very different, saturation and reverb, but the point is without the saturation, you get a little bit more of a clicky, pointy sound. With saturation, it feels a little bit more long and rich. And what that means is that, again, I can ride the close mics higher and get a bit more of a natural sound thanks to that. And this was quite important in this mix, as the room mics, as I said, really were just kind of a blur. Even the decay tree wasn't very defined. So again, trying to make the close mics sound good by themselves was kind of an important thing for this mix, in my opinion. Let's see, a bit of automation again in the more important part where I really wanted the timpani to shine. This is like 2.5 dB, 2 dB. This part here, I really wanted to feel the timpani hit a little bit more. So as you can see, it's a bit higher. Then, let's see, so these were not labeled, so what are these? Okay, that's the bass drum. So I mostly use this one for the bass punch. It was just mostly bleed here. The bass drum didn't even have any kind of highs anyway. Bit of compression just to even out these bass notes. And then I had one more EQ. So just actually cutting all the highs. So after a while I thought, okay, there isn't really any kind of good things in the mids and the highs. There was a little bit of smack from the bass drum, but like I had this in other mics actually, and I didn't really want to use the bass drum mic for that. So I just filtered it a lot and used it as like a kind of a bass definition thing, because the bass from this bass drum mic was actually quite tight. So I used this to just kind of get a tight bass punch kind of mic. It's not that loud, but it helps. If I just wanted more bass punch, I just raise this. Yeah. So then, what's this? I think it's the cymbal. Again, this didn't come out named, so I wasn't sure at the beginning, but I think, yeah, it's the cymbal. So this was a bit harsh. And we actually had some cymbal in the other mics as well. So this one wasn't that necessary. I mean, it was not as necessary as the other close mics, but I didn't want it to add any kind of harshness. So I tamed it. And then, why isn't this doing anything? Well, I guess I didn't need any limiting. Oh, probably I had this on before I did the filtering, so it was actually cutting the highs, and I thought I might as well just filter instead to get rid of the high kind of attack. So this doesn't do anything anymore. A bit of SP 2016 again, not using it for early reflections, but using it for a sort of tail. As you can see, the decay is actually quite high on this. So I just wanted to make the cymbal a bit more washy sounding and less like a tight, dry mic. Yeah. So this is smearing it. Oops, excuse the freeze. Yeah, this is just kind of smearing it a bit nicely. And then the whole reverb helps again, even more. So I don't know what this is. Oh yeah, that's the plink plink. No, it's a Glock. Okay, and what this is doing is, so of course I'm cutting the bass because I don't need this for this type of mic. Now I'm not being too aggressive. You could think that, oh, it's a glockenspiel, I'm gonna do this. No, because then you're also making the bleed sound weird. You don't want to make the bleed sound weird because there's a lot of bleed of the other instruments. So you want to kind of filter it, but you don't want to be too drastic with your filtering. Otherwise you get some weird kind of bleed and you just focus all the instruments around this range and it's just kind of unnatural. So you have to take care of the bleed, but not be too aggressive with how you cut the bleed, if that makes sense. So because the Glock had some fairly snappy notes, I'm controlling these notes to make sure that it doesn't feel like as aggressive and transienty, but feels somewhat more distant. And this also helps me ride it louder, and it sounds more acceptable at louder levels if I take care of this really high transient. Yeah. So no SP 2016 for some reason. It must not have sounded good on this in particular. I guess I just wanted to have the more defined plink sound and not have it smeared in any way. And then this. What is this? I think it's probably tubular bells or something. I wasn't sure, to be honest. Like, it's definitely some kind of metals, I guess, but it's not the Glock mic. Yeah, it's like the tubular bell mic. But there is just so much bleed, sometimes you have trouble telling exactly what this is, right? Again, yeah, see, there was some cymbal bleeds that was adding a bit too much transient, and that wasn't the goal for this. This was more of a tubular bell mic, so I made sure that the cymbals are not really kind of adding too much sharp transient here. So this. Okay, so that's for my percussion. Okay, so the Woodwinds. So actually, these closed mics sound sort of far away for closed mics. They don't sound like the closest mics ever. So this is quite interesting because usually I wouldn't use any closed mics, or I would use them quite quietly. And that is if the room mics, if the Decatry are allowed, are able to record all the instruments clearly. I wouldn't really write the closed mics too much, but here the room mics were not that defined. But we had a lot of nice sound from these closed mics. So of course it sounds a bit small, but at the same time, it's a fairly nice sound, you know? So usually I wouldn't add any reverb to close mics because it sounds weird to just add reverb to very close sounds. It doesn't usually create a nice sound. It can create really weird, harsh, shimmery sounds because you just have all these kind of high close elements going through the reverb. But in that case, because this is sort of mid mics or sort of more distant mics, or maybe it's just the mic type they used, I have no idea. But again, this provides a lot more detail compared to the Decatry, for example. Like the separation between the brass and the woodwinds was impossible to achieve with just these. I mean, it was okay-ish, but you couldn't really get a good enough separation. So it sounded better, in my opinion, to just write these more. You can clearly hear this is a cleaner tone, and this is where more of my mid-range is coming from, as opposed to this is a bit of an unconventional mix. It's a bit of a weird mix. Some of the things I did here, I usually don't do for live orchestra. But this is because of the room, you know, each room has its different mic setup and its quirks and features. So, woodwind bass. Sounds a bit smoother with this EQ. Sending to reverb. So again, if you have really close mics, don't send to reverb, just send the rooms to reverb. But in that case, just like the percussion, I'm relying on the close mics more, riding them higher, so I need them to sound good by themselves and sound it better with some reverb. So I didn't use the Woodwinds L and R. I'm guessing these are like overs, but they actually didn't sound that much more distant, and they didn't really add anything, so I just put them at the minimum here, so muted. As you can see, the panning is not max, it's 66. So the reason is because I wanted the woodwinds to be a little more focused, so the way I'm spreading them around is not as hard as the strings and the brass. So they're a little bit more centered in the stereo image, because if everything is really wide, it's a bit weird. So the flute has this. The flute A has this. So the flute B, flute A. Oboe is the same thing. Okay, so the clarinet has a... I'm guessing this is for resonant notes at some point. Probably around here. Yeah, maybe this one. Yeah, there was just one resonant note somewhere, and I wanted to take care of it. Okay. Bassoon. Controlling a little bit of mids, but again, I'm not cutting too much mids in these because these are the mics I'm relying on for the articulation of the mid-range, because as I said before, it's just kind of blurred in the Decatry. So to get correct articulation, I needed to have this coming from these mics, these sort of close-ish, mid-ish sounding mics. So that's for my woodwinds. So nothing too crazy, right? It's literally just an EQ on this, and the console emulation that's not doing anything. So, and yeah, and one more EQ on the winds bass. And oh, I have a volume automation, a gain on the woodwinds bass. So the thing is, because this is my kind of my, like the main woodwind mic, woodwind group, I'm raiding it a bit. So when I need more woodwinds, I'm raiding it. When I need less, I just cut it. So this was done listening in the context. This also helps control how much proximity I'm getting. For example, because it's a bit fuller sounding here, I wanted to hear the air from the flute. So in that case, I read the closed mics more because they have a bit more detail and I'm getting more air. In this part, there is less stuff going on and I wanted the woodwinds to feel slightly lusher. And because it's pretty much all woodwinds in this part anyway, I'm cutting the closed mics so that way I'm getting more of the room only, giving a bit of a lusher feel. But for the more rich sounding parts, I needed to have this separation by raising the closed mics. Otherwise, it's just a mushy blur. So I wanted to have more detail and articulation, especially in the mid-range. Like this is not just for the air, like the articulation around 500 Hertz, 1K was just that much better in these mics compared to the rooms. So this is Woodwinds bus, just a few dB, like that's like 2 dB up and 2 and something dB down, just playing a bit with the volume here, depending on pretty much what's going on. So generally, the louder the orchestra is, the more I wanted detail and air, so that I can still hear the clarity and articulation in the woodwinds. And as it's quieter, I want more of a whole kind of sound. So I'm cutting these mics. So the brass, as you can see, the brass is a little bit more EQ'd, a bit more panned. So why am I panning these mics so extreme and not really targeting any kind of directionality? So that's because this is full of bleed. The horn mics just has like lots of things in it. It has also trumpets, trombones, etc. So I'm not really using these as individual instrument mics too much, even though that's what they are. But it's more like an overall kind of spread, because the imaging and actually the directionality of the instruments will come from the phantom image, meaning the image that you create in your head when using mics that are panned left and right, Say, for example, you recorded a voice with a pair of stereo mics. Well, you have one mic hard left, one mic hard right, but you actually hear the voice centered, right? Because you actually have sound of that voice in both of the ears. It's the same concept here. If there is a bit more horns in the left mics than the right mics, well, the horns will feel slightly panned left as a result. So you don't need to look at how this is panned, but like the image will come from the resulting phantom image due to the panning here. Now, I panned the trumpets a bit less because I still wanted them to feel a bit centered here. And it just became a bit wide to have all these mics with extreme panning. But for the most part, it actually worked to pan them this hard. So if I just solo them by themselves, it will feel extreme. But there is also horns in this mic. Of course, there is less, but listen to what happens if it feels wide, but suddenly it doesn't feel as extreme as just... And that's due to the bleed, right? Also keep in mind that the room mics are sort of mushed in the center, even though they're hard panned. Like the horns don't feel really that much on the left. Try to focus on the horns in the Deca tree. Right, you can't really tell where it's coming from. So the combination of all these room mics, which kind of recenter everything and mush everything in the middle, and the more hard pan defined directional closer mics, gives sort of an average. So the horns feeling kind of halfway left, which is what I want. So if I panned less, it would sound fine, but it would just kind of exploit the whole potential of the stereo field, in my opinion. So that's why I wasn't shy about how much panning I did. So this is 100% horn right is actually not right. I'm not panning it right. I don't know why it's labeled horn right, but it's 90% left. Horn rear left, 100%, again 90%. This is like 60%, like 30, 100%, 90%, 100%, 90%. So tuba, bass, trombone. Yeah, you get the idea. You can see. So yeah, that's for my brass. So the horns. It was getting a little bit funky, so I controlled the mids a bit. So again, lots of bleed, cymbal bleed was just building up, and I was getting too much cymbal and also sometimes the harsh notes from the horns, but mostly just other instruments like yeah, a bit of the harsh sound from the horns here I wanted to tame, but mostly just the cymbal. So in the rears, the cymbal wasn't as bad, so I didn't need to use this multiband trick, a multiband limiter. And actually, I use this as a bit more of a buzz adder. Removing a bunch of harsh frequencies. But I'm keeping the air, I'm keeping the texture. Okay. So a bit less of the high EQ in the right mic for some reason. I guess I wanted the one that's the most pan to have the most highs to give more directionality. The trumpets. As you can see from the left mic to the right mic, there is quite a difference in tone. This contains a lot of horns actually, and the right mic is somehow closer to the trumpet player, I guess. So it sounds more like just a trumpet. It just sounds cleaner to cut these frequencies in these mics. Trombone. Again, lots of build-up around there, so if I didn't cut that, the whole orchestra would kind of start to sound a bit too honky. I did have a bunch of mid-range from the brass in the outrigs and stuff like that. The EQ of these individual mics was decided while listening through everything. You know, you need to listen through the whole mix, and you can just solo this. Bass, trombone, and tuba. The tuba just preventing these frequencies from building too much. It is kind of a common frequency range on the tuba that can get a bit resonant. And I'm enhancing the sub bass a little bit more to have a fatter tuba as well. And this is the bus EQ. Oh yeah, big difference, right? And some reverb, of course. See, again, these closed mics don't really sound like closed mics. Like I've heard closed mics that sound a lot closer and weird, but these are actually quite articulate, and they're close, but not the closest ever, which is why I'm able to add reverb and actually use them more for independent control and clarity in the mix. And I didn't really have a choice anyway. Either you live with... It's just somehow there is not a lot of independent, like, lot of separation between the instruments in these remakes, even without any processing. It's like as if the woodwinds and the brass and everything was sort of mushed together. And this is nice. I'm guessing it was like they decided to go with this, maybe because of the room. Maybe they thought that, oh, our room mics are not that good, so we're gonna get more like sort of mid, far away spot mics, and that's gonna be more useful. Maybe it's probably on purpose because the room just wasn't that clear, so they thought it's better for mixers if we use this. I'm just guessing here, I have no idea, but it's definitely good that we had these mics, because without all these mics, it would be impossible to get clarity and a nice open sound for sure. Okay, strings. I put a bit of tape on the strings bass here. Not doing much, just slightly saturating the strings. Oh, by the way, the brass had a gain automation similar to, I don't know if this is the wrong color, similar to the woodwinds. As you can see, when the brass is a bit more needed, I'm not hesitating to ride it a couple dB, just so it's just more heard, you know, in the important spots that it plays. And so, the strings. Same idea as the brass with the fairly hard panning. So don't ask me why, but I didn't use the second violin back mic. I think it was just not adding anything, and it was like, it wasn't something I needed. Yeah, I guess I thought it's basically like full of horns. And it wasn't adding as much of a nice definition as the other ones. Yeah, see, like the da 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 da, you hear that line better on this mic. So I thought this one is particularly useless, but all the other ones were useful. So these are probably the ones that has the most bleed, like the strings mics. They just had all the brass in them. So again, it was important to not think too much about how I want to precisely place the strings, and just kind of hard pan to get kind of the phantom panning and get as much stereo field as possible. So it's fairly similar. It's like 90 or 100%. As you can see, violin 1 is 100, violin 2 is 90. This is like 66, 66. And this is 100 again, 90, etc. You get the idea. So very wide. Even the solo violin, the thing is, there was some solo violin in the other mics as well. And it's like there is as much solo violin in this as there is horns. So like the overall result feels natural. Like you hear the solo violin like 40% to the left because it's kind of distributed in these mics. So EQ, well, this is not much. So yeah, this is kind of fine tuning depending on what I'm hearing. So second violins. This EQ was probably as much for the violins as it was for the horns to take care of the bleeds, you know, and certain resonances. This one had a bit more of the woodwinds. It was getting a little bit harsh. This is tricky because you have so much bleed, you have to kind of think about how to make this mic sound good by itself. You know, it's not so much how am I gonna EQ this viola, because this is not just the viola. It's more like how am I gonna prevent this mic from introducing something nasty in the mix. So the cello, some resonances, partly timpani resonances, partly basses and cello resonances. So I had plenty of these in the room mics, and this was just kind of adding up too much with the other mics. And this is to get more consistency between these notes as well. You can hear. It's subtle, but it's helping a bit the tonal balance. The back mic was a bit more boxy, due to having, you know, a less direct sound, so more mid-range, more room, more boxiness, so it was taken care of. Okay, this is for certain notes. See this note, for example. Like they didn't really have any reason to be that resonant. Bass back. So nice, because it is a fairly defined pluck here. No EQ on the solo violin, no EQ on the solo cello. So strings bass. This is controlling some of the brass buildup that's happening in those mics. This is controlling the cymbal bleed, as well as maybe some brass, but I think mostly cymbal bleed. Some of the bass resonances. It's not doing much, I guess. It's probably... Oh yeah, it's doing a bit here. Evening out these bass notes a little bit, but it's not doing too much. Again, certain muddy notes here, like the room must have had some resonances going on around this spot because I felt the need to cut. And then lots of kind of, washiness around 2K. It's quite a big difference if I remove this EQ. I must have put this EQ first because there is just so much bleed. This is more about treating the entire group. I think I treated the entire strings group first, kind of sorting out what tonal balance I want from this group of mics and what's going to complement the best the other groups of mics and the room mics. And then the extra stuff that could be tamed a bit more, I sorted out in the individual EQs. That's why the individual EQs just have a couple cuts or like just one cut, as you could see before. Again, my air boost here and the tape I shot before. So yeah, and then the gain. Oh yeah, so interesting. I did minus 12 dB on the strings bass here. So that's because these strings here didn't need to be loud. They were loud enough and they sounded precise enough without the closed mics, and they sounded better, I guess. Instead, if I keep the normal level. Yeah, I didn't necessarily add anything good, so I just minus 12 dB. as it's building up, I'm boosting the close mics a little bit. So here I have actually quite a few close mics. I mean, quite a bit of volume, let's see. Oh yeah, so in the rooms, these spiccatos were very blurry. Actually, no. Well, they were fine. I mean, they sounded a bit like, I don't know, not the best tone. Like, so I wanted a bit more. Yeah, the tone is a bit like a bit nicer, a bit airier and meatier in the close mics, so that's why. Okay. I kept the close mics here. Oh yeah, I guess I needed a bit more presence, a bit more air. But not here. Yeah, because I guess the cello player was going hard enough here to get that definition. So I didn't need them here, but it was softer here. So yeah, I needed the close mics here. Makes sense. Oh yeah, so that's pretty much it for the strings. Of course, reverb as usual. Just the whole, the same one. Now let's actually see the last step, which is the master automation. And this is actually quite a big one. All these automation lines are on the pre-master, so affecting pretty much all of this at once. So all these groups are sending to the pre-master, including the all rooms bus as well. And I have a bunch of processing on this. And the reason I have so much processing on the pre-master is because of the recordings. Because I wanted to have more control over the color, I would say, and the tonal balance across different sections. So all of this processing kind of adapts to the playing. So let's check out exactly what it does. So the reason I'm doing it on the pre-master is because this automation is to fix problems which are not possible to fix individually. It's kind of broad, I would say, performance automation. So kind of to tweak the tonal balance due to the performance or fix certain booming notes and stuff like that. And in that case, the problems kind of happened in all the mics at once. It was just more easy to address this in the pre-master as opposed to like in every single bus, you know. You will understand once I show you. So first of all, let's start by the top here. So there is a Gullfoss. So this is actually the second Gullfoss. Actually, let's start by the beginning. It's more simple. Okay. Oh, I guess my voice is going through this too. So first we have an EQ. So this is just to kind of target individual resonances, kind of trends I noticed in the orchestra, such as certain sections having slightly too much high mids, certain notes resonating, as you can see, just a bit too much bass overall. So all this was kind of tweaked after the fact. Just fine-tuning what I did in the groups, basically, but in the master. So this is a mastering EQ, really. Now I have some automation, I believe, in this. Let's see. Yeah, so there is one point of automation, which is this second line here, the green line. This is cutting bass. Oh yeah, so there was, so this note here was just kind of woomy and not very defined. The thing is, it was just kind of long and weird. So I thought I might as well just cut it. It sounded better this way. Like it was just staying for too long. But as you can see, I'm not cutting it on the attack. I'm basically leaving the attack go through and I'm cutting it afterwards. It's like boom. It's hard to see, but it's cutting slightly after the initial attack. So this is sort of creating some punch and redefining that muddy note. So that's it for this EQ. The rest is just a bit of dynamic EQ and yeah. And then I have a second EQ. Does this one have any automation? I don't know. I forgot. I guess. Oh. So this whole EQ is turned off and on differently at different spots. So it is this line here. And what this is doing is this is softening the highs depending on the performance. So the orchestra was just getting a bit too airy overall in all the mics. It was getting a bit too airy. So I wanted the intro and the softer parts to be warmer. And as it gained intensity, I wanted a bit more highs. So then I turned off this EQ around here. It just kind of opens the sound very slightly. And then softening the sound again here. I just wanted less air from the flute at this point. This is subtle, but disabling this EQ in the softer parts just creates more of a distant vibe. It's very subtle, but it just creates a bit more contrast, basically, between the loud parts and the quiet parts. Then I have Prem B. So this is controlling the bass notes. As I said, they were very inconsistent. So this is the threshold. By the way, this is just a cut for the cymbal. There is no automation in this, so taking care of the loudest cymbal hits. But this one is the important one. I'm automating the threshold to basically control all the plucky pizzicatos. They were very inconsistent. But here it was fine. Like in the louder parts, I actually wanted to leave more through because there was more mids from the orchestra to kind of balance out the bass notes. But in the quieter sections here, you will see I cut them a lot. So yeah, I'm really not cutting the bass here, but check this out. Without this cut, it's just weird because it's like the notes around this one, like this one is very bouncy and very resonant, and the other ones are not. So this is just to kind of even out the power between these notes. The second one is fine, but the first one was... Like if you check out with a subwoofer, if you check this out with a subwoofer or studio monitors, you will feel it more, like the difference in power between these bass notes. So this is just to even these out. Like this is enough bass. If I put the threshold up, it's just slightly too boomy. So again, fine-tuning not every, but most of the problematic bass notes. And yeah, this is for the cymbal, I believe. Yeah, just the transient of the cymbal was annoying, so this takes care of that. Then we have one more EQ. What is this doing? Okay, this is off most of the time except these areas. Okay, so because of the processing I did, the orchestra was getting a bit too scooped and lifeless. So in these areas, I wanted to have more mids back in. It's not much. 0.56, 0.68 dB. You can hear, just the goal was to make things warmer in these spots. Because it was getting a bit airy and too harsh with all the processing. But again, this is just kind of fine-tuning, so I can't just do this in the Woodwinds mics because it's not just the Woodwinds mics. You know, I'm trying to tweak the tonal balance overall. It's much better this way for live orchestra. I mean, for these types of very small tweaks, because otherwise it's endless. You can't just do tons of automation lines for every single mic position. This is much better this way, in my opinion. So this is the last EQ here. Then I have a Golfos. So this is taking care of the tonal balance, helping just prevent the harshness in the loud parts and sort of evening out the tonal balance. I mean, if you don't know what Golfos does, check it out because Golfos is really amazing. It's a great plugin to restore tonal balance. Again, this is kind of adapting to what's going on in the mix. I have a second Golfos going on, but a narrow range. So this is just to take care of the 190 to 2K, even more. I mean, it's not super necessary. This is very tiny detail stuff. But this Golfos is disabled, except when it's on. So it's on most of the time except these quiet parts actually. The reason being for these quiet parts, I didn't want to scoop so much mids, and Golfos tends to sort of control the low mid range. So I wanted to let it breathe a bit more, which is why I did the EQ here. And I disabled the Golfos. I mean the second one, I just kept the first one. I disabled the second one to let the mids breathe a bit more for these quiet parts. So this is off. And then this is on again. This is really evening out these bass notes. You don't notice that, but there's like a huge difference, like huge compression going on here, just because of how uneven these bass notes were. See, I just wanted these two notes to be soft, like bong bong. But to get the same power, a huge compression needed to happen on the first one. Okay, then I have Elijah EQ, just air boosting a bit, and actually adding a little bit of bottom end around 70 Hertz, but just half a dB. And mostly just a bit of an air boost. So this is a very nice EQ for air. I like it. And then I have a G gain. This is just gain automation for the whole mix. So I'm actually automating the whole mix volume post all plugins. So this is literally the output volume of like the mix. I mean, kind of self-explanatory. I mean, this is some try-hard stuff. Like, I didn't have to do this, and honestly, it's fine without. But you know, somehow I felt like the performance. Maybe it's the recordings. I don't know. It just could breathe a little more, so you can kind of enhance the dynamics of certain phrases by doing this. This is just by feel. Like when I felt like the orchestra is sort of picking up, I just helped it with like half a dB or boost or whatever. And actually I kind of liked what this does. I'm probably going to do this more often. You know, it can be nice in some cases. You know, it sort of makes certain passages a bit more dramatic, even though you don't really hear it. It's very, very subtle, but it just kind of adds a bit of life. Yeah, it makes it a bit more whisper quiet here. makes the swell here pick up a bit more power. But it's like 0.7 dB, you know? Of course, if you do too much, whoa, it would be weird. So yeah, that's about it. And on the master, I don't. Oh, I have some stuff. I have. So this is the master. So that's what the post master. That was the pre-master, and now this is the actual master. And there is more stuff. Console emulation. Through Aaron again, some slight distortion. This is very, very small amounts, but it's a transistor distortion. Compressor. SSL type compressor doing under 1 dB of compression. And then lastly, I had my limiter. So this is just a stupid limiter and barely limiting anything. I believe, well, I'm not going to turn this on because it's going to kill my CPU right now because I'm recording, but it was not doing much. It was doing like 1 dB of limiting. So hey guys, that's pretty much it. I hope you like this mix deconstruction and I will see you in another video. Cheers.